Welcome back to the new season of Information for Life. I've rebranded this as i4L. It's just easier to remember. And I'm going a little off script today. So generally, if you've been listening, you've probably picked up on the fact that I do write out all the scripts to my podcast before I record them. There's several reasons for this. The most important being that I can add the script as subtitles, which is great for the American Disabilities Act or ADA compliance, and also helps people read along. The other reason is that if anyone's noticed, all my sources are also added to the end of the podcast script. So the last few seconds of the podcast, you'll see every single source pop up. So this is good for when I have too many sources to fit in the description itself, which does happen from time to time, depending on the complexity of the issue. Now, this podcast is I've definitely been focusing on relationships quite a bit this past year in this podcast. And while there may still be some more relationship stuff, because human relationships are endlessly fascinating and endlessly complex, I'm going to be trying to focus more on other things that I'm interested in as well this year. So, for those who don't know, this podcast came about after some very personal life journeys, and I'm going to get a little personal and give some background here. So this may help fit the context of the podcast and the things that I speak about in perspective. So just a little personal background about me. I am the oldest of six. We grew up in Western New York, out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the woods, in the outskirts of a little town called Mayville, New York, on a single-lane dirt road. And I had an amazing childhood, definitely lots of days fishing. We lived on a campground that was owned by my ex-wife's parents-in-law. And so we grew up in a trailer, very close together. We were all homeschooled. And I went from that and having a fairly sheltered childhood, I would say, with loving parents who disciplined us as needed and all of that, and really having no childhood trauma, which I consider myself very lucky. We did grow up in resource restriction, so that has given me some different perspectives on things and definitely helps me appreciate what I do have. So I went from that to going into the military as a civil engineer. And during that time, I also attended the Air Force Academy. I did not end up graduating. It was very interesting. I was hitting the 2-year mark, and my family had mentioned that I was kind of becoming a bit of an asshole, which I do get, because any of the military academies, they do build you up to be the best of the best of the best. And there is an attitude that does come with that, and it's very hard to not have that attitude. So I recognized that in myself. I did not like the person I was becoming. And so I went back and enlisted, and I've had multiple tours in combat zones and have seen a lot of stuff. Obviously, not as much as some other veterans, and quite a bit more than other veterans. So I don't compare people's experiences on that level, but I do have I think a fairly well-balanced view of the world, especially after separating from the military after 10 years and getting married to the woman that I've known since I was 5 years old. And we were married for about 6 years, I want to say. And she started wanting children. Well, while I was in the military, I had made the decision to get a vasectomy at 23. Now, it's interesting because I went to talk to a male doctor, and he told me that absolutely not. You're too young. You don't know what you want in your life. I cannot sign off on this vasectomy. Well, I went to talk to a female doctor the very next day, and I laid everything out the same way I laid out to him. And she said, look, you've clearly thought about this for a long time. You're very logical. You've thought about a lot of things with this. She's like, I will sign off on it. So I did. And that was that. And I made the decision not to have children. Well, unfortunately, my ex-wife, who I'm still love, and she's very intelligent. I have nothing bad to say about her. She's got her PhD in special education and technology. She's making waves in that field, which is great. She started wanting to have children, which I get. It's a biological drive. I get that as well. As I've gotten older, I'm going to be 42 coming up here. The answer to the universe, life, and everything, for those of you who have watched Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And it was very challenging. It is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, I think, is I finally had to realize that I was going to have to divorce her, which is interesting because, for anyone who pays attention to stats, when you're married to, as a guy, if you're married to a woman who has a college education and you do get divorced, 90% of those divorces are initiated by the woman. I want to say it's about 74% of divorces are initiated by the woman overall. And researchers are a little bit baffled by this. It's very interesting. The lowest rate of divorce is actually among gay male couples, which is interesting. The highest rate of divorce is between gay female couples. And so these are very interesting stats. And we know that correlation doesn't equal causation, obviously. So researchers are studying this all over the world. And this is global. This is not just a Western issue, because there are a lot of things that Western culture does play into, positive and negative. One of those things being the growing movement, it seems, on social media of people, saying that you need to protect your peace instead of developing basic conflict resolution skills like an adult. This is something that does annoy me, if I'm honest, but at the same time, I have to remember that my life is good. My relationships are good. I, for the most part, avoid people like that and who are short-sighted. I want to say small-minded, but that's not really what it is. I think there's a lot of people out there that have been damaged through relationships with the wrong people. They have not figured yet out how to pick the right people who are truly authentic and who want to grow and work on themselves and who understand both independence and yet the higher level of that, which would be interdependence. And this is whether you're monogamous or ethically non-monogamous, which I'll talk about in a minute. A lot of people don't understand that a good relationship and a healthy relationship and a solid relationship, especially starting out in the first year or 2 years, you will absolutely be triggered by past traumas and past hurt in past relationships. It will absolutely happen. And if it doesn't, that's awesome, but it's going to happen. And if it doesn't, I would wonder how authentic both of you are being with each other and yourselves. Because unless you're a very fortunate person and have been able to avoid any poisonous relationships or people, the odds are likely that you do have some relational damage. The difference is when you are triggered by these relationship traumas, seeing that in your past partner or your partner, your current partner or partners, the difference in a healthy relationship is that you will both, or 3 or 4, whoever, however many people are in that relationship, will allow the relationship to act as a solid, stable floor so that all of you can grow together, work through your stuff, understand each other better, grow as people, grow as couple, throuple, whatever, and move forward and become stronger. And it is tragic when people do not pick up on that. They don't understand these basic concepts, which I get if no one's ever told them or if they've never read, any solid books on relationships. And they've only been reading things by other people that also have the, you got to protect your peace and cut people out of your life when they no longer serve a purpose, which is extremely narcissistic, very narcissistic. I mean, poisonous stuff. And, The Art of Saying No, that's another book. They use that as an excuse to say no to people instead of again dealing with, learning some basic conflict resolution skills and learning how to set up barriers and keeping people at arm's length without cutting them out of your life. These are all things that adults do. And unfortunately, the best thing I can describe is these are people that are young, and not young in age-wise, but young in mentality. And actually, I would not even use the term young. I would use the term immature. When they're immature in their mentality, they're immature in understanding the world and relationships and how these things work, and immature in the ability to identify solid people. So after I divorced my ex-wife, which, like I said, I will always love her. She was a huge part of my life for a very long time, and I wish her the best and hope that she's happy. I looked into ethical non-monogamy. 2 books that changed my life were Sex at Dawn and The Ethical Slut. And there's another book called More Than Two. These changed my life. When I got out of the military, I didn't even know that non-monogamy was a thing, not to mention ethical non-monogamy. I just thought that people just cheated on each other. And that's often the case, unfortunately. The more I've looked into this, the more I've realized only 4% of the population are ethically non-monogamous and live that lifestyle. I have seen a lot of people in the community that are unethical about it. So, for example, you'll have a guy that'll get on Tinder or not Field. Field is a FEELD. That is a dating site or app, I should say, for people who are ethically non-monogamous. So they'll get on Tinder and then have sex with a woman and then tell them they're non-monogamous. And that is highly unethical. It's not fair to the other person. That is not good. But I do see people that have done this, and it's not ethical. You got to be upfront and honest. And yes, it does filter a lot of people out because they'll be interested in you. And the second you say you're ethically non-monogamous, they're like, well, I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for monogamy. And that's totally fine. 96% of the population are serial monogamous, period. So yes, that is going to limit your scope of partners. But to try to trick a person into adapting your way of living is really unethical. But there needs to be some more psychological tests included in these online dating apps, like real psychological tests, so that you can filter out the people that may not be at the level they need to be to have a real adult committed relationship. People who have the mindset of everything ends and self-sabotage in relationships. I mean, this is sad, tragic stuff because these people, unfortunately, are going to end up alone, and they may be somewhat happy, and that's fine. However, most of us are social creatures. Humans developed as social creatures. We would not have survived as a species if we were not social creatures. So these are all very important things that are overlooked, I think, by some of the population, or a lot of the population. And one study I've followed for many years, which is the longest longitudinal multi-generational study ever done. It's by Harvard. It's been 85 years. And they are studying what makes humans truly happy. And surprise, surprise, something I've been telling people for probably a decade or more is that what makes humans happy is wholesome, successful relationships. And this doesn't mean necessarily marriage, but it does mean committed partners, committed friendships, willingness to work through hardship, willingness to grow together, all the things that create a whole integral person. If you're familiar with Ken Wilber's developmental theory and the colors that are involved with that, for example, I am very much at a teal level. I do backslide to green at times. A lot of people I run into are at the red, orange, magenta stages. And that doesn't mean they're less capable or anything like that. It's just where they are on their personal growth journey. And I have and continue to try my best to integrate everything into my own personal life. And that has made a world of difference over the last couple decades. So identifying truly authentic people, identifying people that are willing to grow, identifying people that know what love is. So everyone has to come up with their own definition of love, obviously. But for me, love is, patience, compassion, kindness, willingness to be flexible, willingness to work through hardship together, willingness to grow together. And part of that is also, and this is the really hard part, knowing that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to hang on to someone, but also sometimes the most loving thing you can do, like for me and my ex-wife, is to let them go. And that is extremely difficult. But, and a lot of people, some people, they say they're at that level, but really they're letting the person go because it got a little hard and it got a little difficult. And unfortunately, life is hard. Life is difficult. And if you can't work through things, then what's the point? You're not going to make a solid partner in any relationship, friendships. I'm not talking just romantic relationships here. I'm talking friendships. I'm talking, all kinds of different nuances. So it's tough. It's tough out there. After I divorced my ex-wife, I started looking into ethical non-monogamy more. I had several partners throughout the years, and most of them were solid people. It was just, it didn't work out for one reason or another. Most of the time, it was because they found someone they wanted to be monogamous with. Because again, 21% of the population try the lifestyle. Only 4% of the population live it, which I totally get. And I would never resent anyone for, finding someone that they want to be monogamous with and then leaving. So I finally found, and I had known her for a year, and we observed each other, and I had observed how she reacted and spoke and interacted with other people. I knew she'd had a really bad relationship at the end of it. She never talked negatively about her ex-husband. If things came up, and she would talk about it factually and then move on. And she never had a bad thing to say about him. She clearly still loved him. She wanted the best for him and hoped he was getting the help he needed. But at the same time, she did have to protect herself. At one point, her husband did almost kill her, and she had some massive scars on her scalp because of that. And she had gone through the work and, had worked through that traumatic experience. And she was a very healthy individual for the most part, especially in relationships. And we were together for about 4 years before she died suddenly and tragically. We had planned on moving to Ireland together. Her father lives in Ireland, and we had planned on moving there and building a house and getting married in Ireland, because I will never get married again in the US. Unfortunately, for men and women, there's just no real benefit anymore. It's gotten really just bad. I mean, even the way the tax laws, I don't think this happened on purpose, but even the way the tax laws are set up now, if you're two single people and you get married, you're going to end up paying more in taxes, even just that alone. So yeah, the cons have outweighed the pros now in marriage in the Western society, or at least the United States. Now, I will say the good thing is that no one needs a legal piece of paper to commit to each other. That legal piece of paper clearly, if you look at the stats, doesn't protect you against anything. So in fact, you're inviting the government into your own home. And why would you do that? That has nothing to do with love. That has nothing to do with commitment. That has nothing to do with a lifelong partnership. That has everything to do with power and control, period. End of story. So, and if you guys do split up, man, is it more complicated. I know with my ex-wife and I did end up signing over the house to her. It was a very amicable divorce. But at the same time, I'm also fully aware that when it comes to financial stuff, that set me back, even though, we didn't have children, and, we agreed we didn't have to pay each other alimony, because come on, in a modern society, everyone can get a job. So having to support the other one's lifestyle that they've become accustomed to and comfortable with, that's kind of insane if you really think about it. That it's really entitled, enabled, selfish. Sometimes things just don't work out. So she died, and that was extremely tough on me. And I did go through grief counseling and all that stuff, but I did get back out there after 5 months, which was way too soon. And I was dealing with a lot of emotional codependence after she passed, which I couldn't see, because after I got out of the military, I did get my master's in rehabilitation counseling at the University of Buffalo. And then I did end up working for the VA regional office for 6 years as a counselor. And that was a very, very good learning experience in my life, not only being able to help people on that level. And I truly do believe I was able to help a lot of people. And then hopefully those people went on to help other people, because you never know how much impact you have in the world. And I think a lot of people, especially if you're a good person and you're empathetic and you're kind and, all that good stuff that you would think would be the default setting on a human, but isn't always. I don't think people truly grasp the ripple effect of being a good person and helping other people and, holding space for them, as new agey as that sounds. I think that's very important. So, and that's one thing I don't see a lot of on social media. So knowing that the population is 4% who practice ethical non-monogamy, there's about 21% that try it, but only about 4% live it. That's tough, because that automatically limits your partners right there. I mean, way, way down. And, I do like probabilities math. It took me a long time to get my head around how that worked. But, for example, me and the last person, not my ex-wife and not my life partner, Donna, and yes, I am going to be rambling a little bit. It was interesting. Almost every woman I've had a very committed relationship with has at one point looked at me and been like, "Are you sure you're not on the autism spectrum?" So after the last person, I did do some actual assessments, and sure enough, turns out I am high functioning on that spectrum, more on the Asperger's side of things. And it really brought things into alignment. I realized, because I've always been a data and facts driven guy, and I realized what that stemmed from is I went from being homeschooled and pretty sheltered to going into the military and being forced completely out of my comfort zone, which was able to mask those symptoms or that way of thinking, and then going to the Air Force Academy, which further masks that, and then getting out of the military and getting that master's degree and working in the field, which helped further mask those areas. But I've always been a person who needs to use data and facts and research to understand groups of people, whether that be, men between the first and third quartile of the bell curve, or cultures, or anything else like that. And obviously I take people on a case-by-case basis as well, but I need to understand those patterns of human behavior and be able to say, okay, there's probably, let's say, an 80% chance if this person is reacting this way, given their past behaviors and all that stuff, this is probably what's going on, or could be what's going on. Let's start the conversation from there, right? And then see where they are. So that really brought that into focus, which I think was good and was needed. It didn't change anything about my life, obviously, because you can't change that, but you can definitely, it's definitely good if you get clarity on why you do certain things, and, why you've always felt like an outsider, and why you feel like an observer in the world. And you can't believe people are making all these, to you, seemingly dumb little foolish, childish mistakes, especially when it comes to relationships. And, you're an empathetic person, you have loyalty, you understand the nuances in relationships, and you understand that there are going to be hard times, and, you just work through them. Obviously, as long as there's no actual abuse going on. And that's the other thing. I see a lot of people that they'll take someone that doesn't agree with their views and they'll say, oh, that's emotional abuse or that's gaslighting. I'm like, no, it's not. And I've definitely done some past episodes on that, which you can review. That's the other thing. All my episodes are very research-based, heavily research-based, because at the end of the day, these are not my opinions. They are based in research. And every now and then I'll have someone that will give me research that has an alternative perspective. And I love that. That is healthy debate, and I don't see a lot of that, especially on social media, which is sad. But anyways, so after my life partner died, I got with another person who kind of was very much like me, but as it turns out, a dark mirror of myself is the best way I can describe it. And I defended her after she discarded me after a mere 3.5 months. One of the things she said was, I don't really know who you are as a person. Well, of course, it's been 3.5 months. I'm not some basic person you could just figure out and then, manipulate and use, right? So, that was really rough. I blame myself for a lot of stuff. I thought maybe I was a narcissist and that I was the problem. And, definitely took me a while to find a therapist that would challenge me and not just validate me, treat me, not treat me as a colleague, not assume I know everything, and then go from there. And also understand the complexity between being ethically non-monogamous, having that experience in the military, and then the experience being a counselor and all that interesting neural cocktail, balancing the mindset between push on, suck it up, the way out is through, and then kindness, empathy, compassion of a counselor. And it's a really interesting balance. And I think I've hopefully got a pretty good balance with that going on. Also, the balance between, making the active choice to be completely vulnerable and sharing everything, and then understanding that not everyone can handle that. And holding back. So one of the things I've done this past year is a lot of MMA training, some judo, jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, a little bit of like military style Krav Maga, even some knife and firearms retention training, furthering all of that. And I've taken a few months off of that, which I need to get back to, but I have moved into a new house I had built, and it's got a 1,400 square foot garage with tall ceilings. So I found a commercial weight rack that, I paid $350 for all of that and some of the equipment, which was amazing. Helped the guy dismantle it off the wall in his gym. So like an actual gym, commercial gym. So that was really cool. So I'll be getting back into that for sure. But anyways, through therapy every 2 weeks, my therapist helped me put everything together, and we realized what was really going on with this last individual and what covert or vulnerable narcissism really is, and why other people can't see it until you embarrass them or something like that. It's like being in a building full of funhouse mirrors, and once someone comes along and cleans those mirrors and you can't, face yourself and integrate your whole self, and you've got this carefully crafted image that you project onto the world, and that gets threatened, or you think it gets threatened. It's a nightmare. So it's a nightmare. So thank God only, a small percentage, no more than probably 5%. It's 2.2% diagnosed, but no more than 5% of people most likely are that way truly. There are healthy levels of narcissism. For example, if you build something, and you're proud of that, technically that is narcissism. But that is a healthy level of narcissism. Without a healthy level, it'd probably be very hard to make friends or get anything done, because you'd have no self-confidence, no abilities, But then the unhealthy levels come in when it's impacting your relationships and, your personal life, and you're discarding people that, are authentic and all that stuff. So, but these people unfortunately don't usually ever change. And, maybe she'll be the first, but I doubt it. So, which is sad. It's tragic, but it is what it is. So then after I got discarded over email, this person reached out to me, my partner, Rachel, who's this amazing person. And she said, "Hey, you want to make out?" And I said, "Sure." And it's just gone from there. It's been a great ride. Watching her grow over the past 15 months has been amazing, because she's so mature in so many ways. And then other areas, she still has, room for growth, as we all do. And it's been a pretty incredible 15 months. So we are now looking at a relationship with another person, another woman. She's a little bit older than me, but she's also very mature and has been through some stuff and has done all the healing and all that stuff. And it's been a really interesting thing so far. And, all three of us are going into it with no expectations. And, I think that's really the best way to handle things. To just grow as people and understand that things are going to come up. Humans are messy. You work through it. You allow flexibility, growth, all that stuff. One thing I've realized is that a really good thing for me is that I'll give people 3 strikes in a 2-year period for the same thing, right? And that's, obviously I tell them when they make that strike. I don't have so many personal boundaries that it becomes a trap for them. And then I am able to use that as an excuse, oh, you crossed all these boundaries that I didn't tell you about. Because that happens a lot. I've noticed that. Too many people out there are trying to protect their peace instead of developing conflict resolution skills. And those people are going to be alone, which is sad. But that is a choice they're making. And it is not my life. My life is good. My relationships are good. I have been able to avoid toxic people for most of my life. There's been now my first wife, we had some issues, but she had borderline personality disorder and bipolar disorder, which is actually what got me interested in field of psychology and counseling and all that stuff. So if that hadn't have happened, I wouldn't be the person I am today. And the last one was, due to the emotional codependence that I was having, I ignored the red flags. I was like, well, she's like me. She's got nuance, and I defended her a lot to my friends and my therapist and all that stuff until it finally came in. And, I just had to realize, hey, I'm always going to love the person who I genuinely thought she was. But at the end of the day, I'll never know how much of that was real. And because I never believed in the soulmate thing before, I never believed in the pheromone thing before. Yeah, it was intense. It's like a dark mirror of myself, but I thought it was a mirror of myself. Nope, dark mirror. So that was rough. But I'm glad I went through it. I wouldn't have started this podcast if I hadn't, and I wouldn't have written a 742-page book and that I wrote and published last year called Unlocking Life. It's just volume 1, and I've already got enough information, I'm pretty sure, to write volume 2. And this year, like I said, there's still going to be some relationship stuff. I've got about 15 episodes written that I need to record. And there are a few things about relationships in there. But because that's one thing I've noticed is that relationships permeate everything. Really, the only thing that matters at the end of the day is people. Stuff doesn't matter. And that's one thing I learned in the military just through my experiences is stuff doesn't mean anything. Stuff is just stuff. People and human relationships are what actually matter in this world. So, and sadly, a lot of people still don't understand or realize that. But they also haven't been through the same life experiences, and I also wouldn't wish that on anyone. So hopefully they can learn that without having to go through some pretty challenging things. Yeah. So I know I'm rambling here. My mic stopped about halfway through, so I've had to redo some of this. But yeah, I'm just looking forward to the journey. I'm looking forward to the rest of my life. I'm about to be 42, and it's been good. It's been a challenging journey, but it's been a lot of personal growth, and I would not change it for the world. This last year I did
quite a bit of MMA training, some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, some judo, some basically a very broad spectrum of different things, including some knife and firearms training, and even some military-style Krav Maga training. So some of the stuff I'd already trained on in the military, other stuff was completely new. But either way, regardless, I've taken a few months off. I'll probably be getting back to it now that I've got the garage, 1,400 square foot garage, moved into the new house. We'll have the gym set up, and eventually I'll be putting a woodworking shop, welding shop. Before that, I need to do raised beds around the house. And I did give Rachel the option to move in with me, which she's done. So that's been a growth process in itself. And she does have a lot of stuff still in the garage, but that'll change. She is making a good dent on that. So it's good stuff. It's all good. So we are probably still looking at least traveling to the Philippines for a couple months, 2 or 3 months. That is something I definitely want to do, because now that I have this house, I could definitely go to the Philippines 6 months out of the year, use this as my home base of operation. And I think that might be a really nice thing to do. It would also help Rachel build up her own retirement, and could give her some new opportunities. So I'm looking forward to it. It'll be good. But I look forward to this new season. I hope all of you are well. And welcome back to Information for Life, or i4L, Tips for Greatness, Navigating Life with Insightful Information.